Hi, everyone, and welcome to Women's Health Matters podcast. And today I have an amazing guest. She's from Belgium and she's married with 4 children. Her husband is English, and they've made this huge decision to move to Ireland 20 months ago. So that's another big thing that we weren't even going to talk about. And I'm going to let her introduce herself. So, welcome to this podcast, and please tell us who you are and what you do.
Thanks so much for having me here today, Lucy. I am Marie Delanote, a transformational leader, ethereal crystals master, and speaker who develops people's awareness by creating methods, by teaching methods to people how to transform lives by managing the mind and the emotions. So I have over 10 years of experience in teaching people how to use the power of visualization, the power of the mind, and emotional regulation in order to turn their lives around. And I also heal with the energy, simply the energy of crystals, which are called the ethereal crystals. So we can heal relationships, the physical body, buildings, or whatever it is. So people, again, once more can transform their lives. And I always work from, and I teach and I heal from a place of my own experience, like breaking free from family experiences and circles. I gave birth to a 1 pound baby, so it's about 480 grams, and she's now a happy and healthy 10-year-old. I was diagnosed with autism, and I'm bringing up neurodiverse children. And I went from being depressed, feeling depressed, I should say, it's the feeling, to stepping into my power and to now growing 3 global businesses.
Wow. So I have loads of questions to ask you. Okay, so how did you decide to go on this journey? What brought you to this point?
Well, there was one major transformation because I have been on this journey. Let's say it's who I am. It's what I came here to do. It's from the age of 17 that I already got into trying to find out more about uh, tarot cards and crystals, and I found it such an exciting world. But you have to know, and the question I would pose first here is to people to think about that. Do you think that where you are in your life right now, who you are, simply has to be accepted and is not to be changed? Because when I was a lot younger, I was a musician. So it's a totally different world.
Hmm.
And I was in music because I started it when I was 7 years old, and my parents found out that, oh, she's really good at this. So I was a very talented musician. And as I grew older, Marie was good at music, so Marie does music. And because I didn't like school and I hated maths, it was like, okay, this is good for Marie. This is who she is. And
Were
it's
you
kind of
happy with that? Sorry, I'm interrupting you. Were you happy with that?
no. Well, that's the whole thing. And I think many of the listeners, I'm sure, can relate to this. We are kind of being put in a certain identity. I was a musician because I was good at it. And I even went to a specialized school with an entry exam because I was good at music. And it was a good job for a woman because then when I had children, I could always be home in the holidays as a teacher. But no, I was not happy with that. But it was as a child growing up, and I think many listeners will have that. As you grow up, you are given that identity of who you are. Because, look, I'm not blaming my parents because they wanted me to be safe. And they knew if Marie does music and she has a good job as a teacher, then she is in a safe little box. So I don't blame them. And I'm sure many of you will recognize this. And parents do it from the goodness of their hearts. But that's not who I was. But I think that's then a really difficult thing that happened because when I was about 17 years old, when I had that freedom to start walking around on my own and finding things out for myself, I wandered into the spiritual, the holistic shops. And then a whole new world opened, and I was so intrigued by it. But that was completely outside of the boundary that I knew, of the boundary that kept me safe, which I was taught what was good for me. And people doing spiritual work were mostly con people. And there was no money to be made with that. There was no career in doing holistic work. So that's a belief that I was taught, even though this is what I came here to do. So it was a really difficult journey to get to where I am now, to actually even standing on stage and speaking about what I do, to do my one-on-one sessions, to do the healing work, teach other people how to do healing, because the beliefs and emotions I originally had about that type of work were not very good. And of course, when we believe something and we have that emotion with it, it's a certain vibration we vibrate out, and it's going to go against everything we want to do. Because when I first started doing the work, I didn't have any clients because I was vibrating out, I'm a con person, or I don't make money, because that's the belief I was ingrained when I was a lot younger. So I had the identity, I'm a musician, I stay safe, whilst who I was so much more. So I had to break through all of those boundaries that were put upon me.
So how did you do this? How did you change? Because obviously you must still love music. It must be still a passion of yours. Or did you completely go away from it?
Um, the well, this is such a beautiful story, and I love telling it because if that's okay for me to share it, because it
Absolutely.
really shows how things transformed for me. So just over 10 years ago, so that was already, let's say, 15 years after I started my journey and trying to find out more about what I really loved. And because I didn't believe in myself, like everything I now just explained, who am I to do this work? You know, there was so many layers of disbelief and negative emotions around it. And then just when we moved to England from Belgium with the family, 3 children, my husband, and I was pregnant with our fourth child. So as we moved, I had no family and I had no friends. They even drove on the other side of the road, which was a big thing back then. So everything was so different, and I felt so alone. And my husband would travel a lot for work. So every time that he left me in this new country where I knew no one and I was there with my kids and emotional being pregnant, I felt so angry with him because I felt left. I felt completely left. So I was not in a good state. Now, when I was about 23 weeks pregnant, in the morning, suddenly my waters broke. Now I knew straight away this is not right. This is not good. So my husband rushed me to the hospital. And when we got there, I hardly got any positive news or anything. It was just confirming, yes, your water broke, the infection can get to you. It was just all quite dark. But just in case if the baby would make it, they transferred me in an ambulance 2 hours away from home to a hospital that had the equipment to look after her. Now, I was there one day, and the next morning, I go to the toilet. And don't ask me why, this is really weird, but in a hospital, at the maternity ward anyway, in front of the toilet, there's a big mirror. So I go to the toilet, and as I look up, I suddenly see a tiny little head between my legs. So I panicked massively. I pulled the emergency cord, and within seconds, the bathroom flooded with nurses and midwives, and the alarm was going off. So really, try and get everyone from the neonatal intensive care unit over because they knew this is not good. So whilst I was being supported by midwives, I gave birth to my 1 pound baby, which was 480 grams. She didn't cry, of course, couldn't. It was quiet, and her Skin was sticky and red, hadn't fully developed yet. Eyes were fused shut still. Her brain hadn't unfolded yet. She couldn't breathe, obviously, on her own. And her body was covered in bruises because the birth trauma. And of course, we didn't know whether that was internal bleeding or anything else. But in that moment, when they whisked her away, and I was literally at the bottom of the barrel, because when it happens to your child, you just, I give up. I surrendered. It's the biggest surrender I have ever felt. I was like, hands up, I'm done. I don't know what else to do. And as she was whizzed away, and it was heaving with people around me, but they put me in this hospital bed. And at that moment in time, suddenly I was surrounded with the most surreal feeling of peace, of love. It is something that I did not feel with my physical emotions. It was something so beyond everything I've ever felt. And it was, even though I knew in that moment in time, nothing was okay, I knew, feeling that everything was going to be fine. So at that moment, because of course, I realized that all that anger I had felt towards my husband every time he left, to quickly whiz that one in, was because when I was 5 years old, my father left my mother. Well, rephrase that. As a little girl, as a 5-year-old, he left me. So I had never dealt with those emotions, because in those days, kids' emotions, kids are fine, kids get on with things, but what we don't, they don't. We need to teach them how to deal with those emotions. So that is actually what caused the extreme premature birth. Because at that moment in time, I started realizing how it all works. Because I had Streptococcus A. So Streptococcus A is a really painful infection in your throat. So I couldn't say, it was hurting to say what I was feeling. And feeling, the epicenter of emotions is in your womb. But I was pregnant at the time, so it affected my pregnancy. But of course, at that moment in time, because I hadn't believed in myself, and it was all the negative beliefs regarding healing. But then the universe brought me my 1 pound baby. And from that moment on, it just clicked. And I knew, okay, this is literally like I jumped out of the seeds. All the old things gone. This is the work I'm doing. So in combination, because I call it a powerful cooperation between medical and spiritual healing. The doctors did what they had to do, and I came in energetically. And I healed with colors, with the angels, psychic surgery, with Reiki, everything I knew under the sun, I used it. And she's now happy, healthy 10-year-old.
That's so beautiful. I love that she's flying around the place. That is so cool. That happened to a friend of mine. Her baby was born at 24 weeks. Actually, two friends, and both boys. One of them now, he is 5 years old, I think, 5 or 6. And I actually met him at a horse show. I'm mad into horses. At a horse show in April time. And funny, Nicky George, his name is. The funniest little, lovely, really lovely little boy. And he was absolutely soaked from head to foot, like been in a water fight. I was laughing my head off. And he actually found my friend who was sat beside me, and because he wanted to go back to the lorry to get changed. I was laughing. And another friend, the same thing at 24 weeks. And he is, I say now, he must be in his late teens now. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it's really good,
Fantastic.
isn't it? Yeah, it's so good.
It's
But
wonderful to hear.
I think going back to what you were saying, and it's something that I would experience a lot when I I specialize in women's health, and so I'm an expert in, a consultant in menopause and fertility. So I find that women, yeah, that would be a massive thing, the holding in of emotions, huge. But it's also we're taught to hold them in as well. It's something that it's been inherent in us for years and years, generations and generations and generations. So how do we get the message across that it's okay to let these feelings out? What would you say to women who are holding it in?
I always go back to 4 steps. I think the number one, the major one, is that you need to be accountable, because blame kills accountability. And this might sound really harsh. And honestly, I'm not, when I heard it long time ago, I would be like, well, it wasn't me, it was my father, or it was. But being accountable means, okay, what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, what I'm experiencing, and I feel angry because he said this, or she. Be accountable and go and look within yourself. So that is the big first step. Take responsibility for everything that's happening within you and in your world. The second step, I always say, is be aware. So without even saying anything, become so deeply aware of the story you tell yourself, what's going on in your mind, and what you are feeling, because your emotions are your guidance system. Your emotions tell you everything about what's going on in your life. And it's once the emotions haven't been dealt with for a long time that eventually it manifests physically. That's just kind of the next step. And then it's never too late. It's never too late. But if we can try and avoid that, that's of course a wonderful thing. So second step, become very aware. What's the story I'm telling myself? When something happens, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? So really check in with yourself. The third step is then actively do something about it. Again, it's an own game. It's a self game, nothing to do with anyone around you but yourself. And you don't even have to do it out loud. You can think within your own mind. So give a very simple example. If there is something that someone has and you see it and you feel very jealous, you just feel deeply within, because maybe it's something you always wanted to be, but you've never done it. So you feel that jealousy. Jealousy is a very valid emotion. That's a big one. We have to value all the emotions. Anger is a very valid emotion. Feel it, really allow it, because it tells you so much. And then you can go, so once you're aware of that feeling you have and the mind, I want that, I'm so annoyed with them because they have it, go and change it. Do that with the methods, the third step. And instead of thinking, these people, they have this, go and think, wouldn't it be nice if I had that? And as you change that, well, wouldn't it be nice? You can feel immediately in your body how you just release. And from the emotion there, you go to release. So that's a really big one. And that way you can also retrain. So you're aware of what's going on and you retrain it. And that's where the fourth step comes in. Be persistent. A very good example there is when people decide they want to lose weight or they want to get some muscle and they sign up for a gym membership. The first day you're going, you might feel like, oh, I feel like I've lost 20 kilos, or I feel like I have muscles. But when you look in the mirror, you're not going to see any change. But if you keep going to the gym, then slowly but surely your body will change. That's being persistent. And that's exactly the same with changing how we feel and how we think, and then how our physical body, its state, its health is, or even the physical world around us. Because if you want to know what you're thinking or what your emotional state is, you only just have to look at the world around you that you've created. So that's where it comes in. Be accountable, look within yourself. Be aware. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Change it step by step, gently. Wouldn't it be nice? Something that gives relief and you feel it, and be persistent. And before you know it, just like going to the gym, if you are persistent, things will change. Physical ailments will go. Wonderful people will come into your life that will guide you and suddenly things change. Opportunities will come up that you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And that's all because you persisted in step by step, changing your mindset and changing how you feel.
Yeah, it's good. That's really great advice, actually. It's fantastic because if you do those four things, no, you can't. I think you can keep doing them, but and if you like say like you fall off the wagon, it's okay to just take your breath in and climb back up again. I think, yeah, don't
Absolutely.
feel that you failed. I think it's just a learning. Actually, I hate the word failure, or I think it's just a learning that you go through. So I just think just look at it as a learning phase, and not to do that. No, that doesn't work for you. So try something different. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think the last thing you do is beat yourself up when you have a bad day. I've been doing this for years now, and there is still things we all learn. Otherwise, we wouldn't continue to be here. We continue to learn no matter where we are on our journey. And I think the biggest one indeed is, I think you said that really well. If you fall off the wagon, don't beat yourself up for it
Mm.
because we're only human. Take a day off, feel sorry for yourself, lay in the sofa, have a tub of ice cream, whatever it is,
I know.
but then jump back on. Jump back
Absolutely.
on.
And on your day off, do it with style. Don't
Absolutely.
feel don't feel bad about it. Just do it with style. So if you're gonna eat that bar of chocolate, do it with style. Do it and
Yeah,
enjoy every second of it. Don't feel guilty.
absolutely. Because otherwise you run back into the guilt game. And the guilt game is our emotions. For women, it's our womb, it's our sacral chakra. And then you're back onto a train where you don't want to be at, and you kind of go two steps back instead of just resting for a moment. So, yeah, just as long as take a deep breath and then you keep going, because take it from me, it's worth it.
So you had a massive move. I'm going back a little bit in your story from moving from Belgium to the UK. How did you decide to do that when you had no family and like your kids were young? Would it have been a very difficult move?
Well, I'll find it really interesting how our big moves have happened from Belgium to England, from England to Ireland. It's actually my husband is in business. He's a businessman. He works globally, but I call him my little witch because there is certain things, and I can see when it's happening. It's nearly like we are talking on a completely different level, and even though I'm not consciously aware of it yet, he's picked up the vibration and he pushes things through. So this is what happened on both big moves. His brother passed away. My husband's brother passed away, and his parents are a little bit older. That was just over 10 years ago. And he felt this sudden urge that he had to be in England for his parents. And even though the 10 years in England was an incredibly steep learning curve on so many levels, I wouldn't change it because we've learned so much from it. And it was the same again. And when we moved from England to Ireland, it all again happened within 2 months. It's like he knows the decision is made. We need to do this. And he's in that stream with the river. And I think that's a great message. When we try and stop the river flow, well, we drown, we bump our heads, there's major panic and anxiety, but we turn around like what my husband's done with those two big ones, and it's like, all right, I'm feeling this, and you go with the stream of the river. You might be flipped up and you think, oh my God, what's going on? But because it's natural, you land back on your feet and you keep going and you end up where you need to be. So this is kind of how it's happened for us through my brother-in-law passed away, and then we knew we had to be there. And with Ireland, it was just because he wants to bring the children up and myself in Europe. And so Ireland was a beautiful
Sure.
way to go. But we have another gorgeous story of how we were guided where we ended up in Ireland.
Would it have been hard because you said to me before we started this interview, your children are 17, 15, 11, and 10. So for them, hard to move with friends, especially when they've been, in the same area for such a long time. How was it for them moving? How did you broach it with them to move?
I think Because in a way, in our family, because we are very much open and talk about go with the flow and things change. That's kind of a funny one. I'm going a bit like this now because it's important I mention this first. We have 3 of our 4 children who are on the autism spectrum.
Okay.
And I was diagnosed when my boys were diagnosed.
You were
So this
diagnosed as
means,
well. Was that a
yes,
shock to you, or were you okay with that?
it was an absolute relief
I love that.
when we were all diagnosed. It was like, oh my, this is finally, I'm not weird. I'm not, there's nothing wrong with me. And it was not about the diagnosis, it's about the name. It was about, okay, how can I work with this now? And it was about understanding who I was and why I was thinking the way I did or doing what I did or what bothered me, and the same for my boys. So again, not about the label. I'm not one to label, but we just used the diagnosis and the name to just deeply understand who we were and how we could work with that. And that has been an absolute blessing, because thanks to that, we got all the golden nuggets out. We learned to understand how we work, and that's a beautiful thing.
See, autism, I know very little about autism, so I'm not, I'm not anyway knowledgeable about it at all. But sorry, excuse me, what would have been your classic symptoms that you didn't know what was going on, and then when you were diagnosed, there was such relief?
Yeah. Well, being on the spectrum is very different. That's why it's a spectrum.
Yeah.
It's when you know one person with autism, one person with autism. It's so different depending on the individual. For me, and especially 2 of the other 3 who are on spectrum, the difficult one was change and social communication. We don't like change, and we live in a family. That's probably why my husband is my husband. He would change things every day. He just throws everything up, and it's like, oh, let's go there, let's go there. And then we're like, we're not prepared. This is not planned. We don't like this. So I think that's partly why he's in my life, to really teach me that change is the only constant in life, and it's a beautiful thing. So for us, that's the main thing with the autism, is the change and social communication, especially my eldest son who has Asperger's, which is high functioning autism. Social communication was a difficult one. So for me especially, as for girls is again different than boys, is that I would become a persona when I was in public, because I have a father who is a master communicator. He speaks publicly. He's so open and confident, and everyone just listens to him. He's just such a good speaker. So I would copy that. I would grow up looking at how he would do that, and then I would do that when I was in social surroundings. But that's not really comfortable. That didn't used to be really comfortable, because when I was in big events, after an evening, I would have to hide and take a whole day just to recuperate, because there's so many impressions. If there's too much on my screen as well, I can't through it. There's an overwhelm of information. So I really had to learn to block things out, or if things are coming too fast or too much, I need to tell people I'm on the spectrum. Can you please send it to me in a lot more organized way, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've no problem, if people say, are bombarding you with stuff, you're okay by saying, look, I'm on the spectrum. Can you just make it simple?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's something that's come over the years as well. And not everyone would understand it. There's still many people who say, oh, it's such a label and you don't look like you're on the spectrum.
Yeah,
Well,
I
it
know
hasn't got a look. It
yeah.
happens within. It's in my brain.
Yeah, I know that. And autism, it is about a certain look, isn't it? With autism. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not. You wouldn't say when my children don't look, or what is
I
an
know.
autistic look?
What is it? Yeah. Well, it's back to what we have been taught, again, in that box.
Yeah.
What we
Yeah.
have been taught, what it is
Yeah.
autism. And it
Yeah.
is true.
Absolutely. And if I may, because as you're saying this, I'm suddenly thinking of this beautiful analogy of this visual. What you were saying, it's again what we were taught. So imagine that we're all this little seed, and the shell of that seed is all those things we were taught, the beliefs, the emotions, because certain things we feel is from parents, certain, sometimes you're like, oh my God, my mother used to feel that way, and you've just taken it over because that's family circles. So that little seed and that shell is all those beliefs, emotions, everything we've been put upon us. And sometimes that's even from past lives that's come, that we consciously don't even realize it. Now, we are in that little seed, but we all know that within that seed is that massive oak tree. It's in there. But in order for that massive oak tree to be there, so before you can become who you want to be, you need to let go being who you are. So the seed needs to stop being the seed, let go of all these beliefs and emotions so it can burst open and the tree can come out. And that's, I think, a very powerful thing to know.
It's an incredibly strong analogy, actually. But look, you see, then we go back to the two emotions that most people have is fear of not being good enough and fear of not being loved. They're the two really deep-seated emotions that a lot of us suffer from.
Absolutely. It's like when I do my I give one-on-one sessions as well. And the most of the work, when people come from the first time, it's always in the belly, the emotions, and in the hearts. And that is indeed all blockages of self-love, unconditional love, but I should say they are full with conditional love. So we need to make that change. And of course, these emotions, thinking that most of us souls who are on this planet have been here so many times. So you only have to look back at all the things that have happened on the planet, to how things were in the 18th century, in the 14th century, and imagine that as humans, we lived all these things and all these bad things happen. So in our base chakra, actually, that's where our coccyx is, are all the physical and emotional things that went wrong that have happened to us since the birth of our soul. And unless we become consciously aware of that, it's going to stay sitting there. It's again like the seeds. That shell is going to stay there. So what I then do is I tune into that, because with every individual, it's a different story. Every individual has their own things to why they have that fear and to why they have issues with self-love. That's why there's so many heart attacks and heart issues these days, because people haven't dealt with grief. So their heart literally stops. Again, the physical body reacts to the mind and the emotions. It's showing you, hello, this is what's going on. So, and then we tune deeper and we literally peel the layers off so that can be released through insights and energetically, so people can become more grounded, so the trust can come back. They can start to listen to their feelings again. They can start to act upon their desires and find that unconditional love, which has disappeared from humans for a way too long time now. And they can learn to communicate and see all the beauty in life, because we've forgotten how beautiful life is, because we've literally done this. And this, I mean, that's our third eye. We've closed it off because this is linked to the energy of violence and war, or you see things, which aren't nice. So we've closed it because I don't want to see it anymore. But of course, that is then linked to all the issues with migraine, headaches, brain problems. That's all linked to this, because people are literally then saying, I'm shutting out my brain. I don't want to do it anymore. Do you see the correlation? And that's what we're doing. So we need to open it all up again through consciously knowing what we're thinking, allowing what we're feeling, changing it, and be persistent. And step by step, we can become that oak tree and no longer be stuck in the small seed.
It's very true. It's a brilliant analogy. So how do you bring the crystal healing into the healing process?
Well, I've loved crystals for a long time, and I used them in my baby when Eloisa was born at 24 weeks. I would put the physical crystal in her socks during the day when I was around, because of course with children you have to be careful that it's safe. And it had such beautiful, amazing effects because she was struggling with edema. So her whole little body, her little arms and feet was all holding up water, wasn't releasing. Of course, again, if you see, she wasn't letting go. Water is emotions. Water always represents emotions. So she clearly had loads of emotions regarding her premature birth that she couldn't let go of. So I would work with the chalcedony crystal, put it in her sock, and within no time the edema would go because she would be able to release that emotion. So even don't underestimate these tiny little babies, whether you're a tiny little baby or 100-year-old person. We all do the same thing, and we all react to this beautiful healing and awareness and crystals. So what the crystal does is, of course, it vibrates out a certain energy because everything is vibration. And it starts with a vibration that creates energy, that creates the physical. And the energy, the vibration of that crystal would affect the vibration in her body. And of course, when that energy changed, she was able to release the emotion. So crystals are very powerful. What I now do, because I had a gorgeous moment where I was doing a session. Now I do distance healing sessions, and just as powerful because then I can work with anyone wherever they are in the world. But back then, 10 years ago, I was doing 9 years ago, it's 10, a one-on-one session physically. See, I like being correct. That's my autism. To be right. So I was doing a one-on-one session, and this lady had come to me because she lost her husband and she was left with four young children. And as she was holding a crystal and I was doing the work, I was suddenly guided to imagine the crystal within her heart. So, long story short, what happened there is at that moment in time, I started to work with purely the energy of crystals. Because as we're in the Aquarius time, we're going back to that. We're going back to working with everything energy. So it comes directly from the ethereal crystals dimension. So the energy of those crystals, the ethereal crystals, is 400 times stronger than the physical ones because they've never been affected by anything on Earth. That's the thing with physical crystals. They are being touched, they are being mined, sometimes in not very good conditions, they are being transported, so their energy is affected by it. And ethereal crystals, the energy is so pure and so powerful. And by placing that energy within the heart, so imagine the heart was vibrating full of grief and slow. And when I put the vibration, the high vibration of that ethereal crystal within that low vibration, the low vibration will take up speeds and will go for, and that's what healing is. And then eventually that vibration of the heart will be healed. It can be even more complicated, of course, because the changing of the vibration, the mindset adapts as well. So it's a whole process and it's all linked. But that's basically what it is.
That's fascinating. I don't know much about crystal healing, but I've heard a lot about it. And when my sister had cancer, she used to go for crystal healing, and she used to go in literally like a shell. My mom would say sometimes her husband used to carry her in, but she always walked out. Always walked out. It was amazing healing process for her. She really did help. Really did help her a lot. So it did. So
That's amazing to hear.
Yeah, you've been an absolutely amazing guest and so informative. And I've got loads more questions to ask you, but we'll have to do another podcast to get all more information in. I'd love to hear more about what you do and how you help people. So if anyone wants to avail of your services, how can they get hold of you?
Well, on my website, you'll find everything from free ebooks to Oracle cast sessions, meditations, courses, and that's www.mariedelanote.net. So it's MARIEDELANOTE.net. Or, of course, on Instagram at mind_healer, because I'm the mind healer. Or anywhere else, you'll find me on social media under my own name, Marie Delanote.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And also, I always forget to say this, please subscribe to the channel. And if you ever need to chat with me regarding any menopausal issues or anything to do with fertility, just give the link a click in the chat box and that will get you directly to me. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy.